So forms of security are a big thing in the commercial landscape, in any sort of commercial transaction that one can imagine. So from getting a loan from a bank to business funding in order to run your business, to securing accommodation, securing commercial premises. So forms of security are very important, and you find that across the board. There's certain similarities between how they're actually used. So it is valuable to speak about each and then maybe mention where these can be applied or where they are applied in practice. So the first form of security that is the most common across the board, and this is if you buy a business, if you rent accommodation, if you rent commercial premises, is an actual cash contribution, a level of skin in the game, right? So in rental applications on commercial and residential premises, a person would often pay a certain amount of money. Now, this money is not supposed to be utilized. So the idea behind this is to retain an actual cash figure in reserve to ensure that if something were to go wrong, the other party to the transaction has access to actual cash. So as an example, if a person buys a property or even sells a property, sometimes if the seller still has obligations due in terms of that sale agreement, amounts are retained by a conveyancer pending the obligations being fulfilled. So in rental agreements, a very similar thing. The amount gets paid over to an estate agent potentially, or the landlord directly who's obligated to retain this money safely and apply it in terms of the relevant legislation. So in residential, it would be the Rental Housing Act. In commercial, just your standard common law and contractual terms would dictate that. So that's one of the most common, especially in the property and rental space. Now, the next most common is called the suretyship. Suretyship is when a person or company, whatever it might be, signs and holds itself accountable for somebody else's debt. So most common in practice with loan agreements, for instance, if a bank is willing to fund you for the purchase of a property, especially if it's a company, they will require the director to sign as a surety to guarantee the payment of that amount of money. If, for example, it's a sale agreement where somebody's due to pay a certain amount of money, or for example, let's say it's a rental contract. If you're unsure that the tenant's going to be able to satisfy the rental payments, for example, in student accommodation, this is a very big, this is used quite widely, where if the student enters into the lease agreement in their own name, the parents will step in and sign as a surety on behalf of the students. What's interesting, what many people don't know, is there's also an instrument called a guarantee that actually works, in my opinion, a lot better than a suretyship because it actually guarantees the payment for somebody else's debt upon there being a default. The difference between the two contracts or the two agreements is a guarantee. The person guaranteeing, the guarantor, doesn't have the same rights to dispute whether the payment's due or not. Whereas with a surety, the surety typically holds the same defenses as the debtor does. So that's just a little nugget of wisdom there when it comes to guarantees versus suretyships. Now, past this is where it starts getting a lot more complicated. Doesn't necessarily deal with the rental space all that much, but it's just good for people to know. If you're lending money and you're looking for forms of security, there's two types that are particularly strong. And that is the mortgage bond, which a lender like a bank registers over an actual property. And then there's a notarial bond, special or general, that they register over immovable property. To touch on whether a property can be used as security. Yes, absolutely. And this is where this example comes in. You register, you can give a property up as security. Now, the best way of doing this would be to mortgage the property. And if payment of whatever amount is due isn't isn't complied with, the property can be sold. Now, in rental applications, it's very unusual to do this, because if you're only guaranteeing for example, if the rentals are only 4,000 Rand a month, securing it by way of a mortgage bond over a property is a bit excessive. If, however, your rental payments are 40,000 Rand a month, it's a commercial premises, it's 100,000 Rand a month, it starts making a lot more sense, especially if none of the other forms are acceptable. And where they wouldn't be acceptable, as an example, is having a foreign national sign a surety. A person that you can barely collect against, having them sign as a surety and they're in another country is not going to help. Or maybe the surety has a bad credit record. That's also not going to help. And if a person doesn't have cash to put in a reserve fund where they can pay 3 months deposit ahead of time, like most commercial premises expect, that again will not work as a form of security. So you would rely on potentially mortgaging a property or having a bond registered over movable assets.